Welcome to the de Havilland Aircraft Museum video channel at Old Warden in Bedfordshire. The reason for our visit is because we're previewing a very special de Havilland related event that's going to happen later on this year in July. 100 years ago, the Moth first flew. The Moth Club are going to gather as many different variations of that aeroplane. They want to get 100 of the examples of that iconic aircraft together in this one place.
So Dennis, we've come here to have a look at moths, but this isn't a moth. Tell me about it, please.
So this particular aircraft is actually unique. It's the only one in the world. It's a DH.51. And it's the precursor to the Moth, and there's a lot of design features in this aeroplane that led on to the later very successful Moth.
So was a DH.51 successful?
In many respects, no. Only 3 of them were actually built. It was designed as a 3-seater aeroplane, which these days seems a bit strange, and designed as a tourer. But there were a number of issues with this design, and eventually they abandoned it and went on to design the next successful plane, which was the famous DH.60 Moth.
Okay, but was there anything good about it?
Yeah, there's a lot of things in this particular aeroplane that pointed towards the success of the Moth. The most obvious is the fuselage design. Because this particular aeroplane was designed to be easy to maintain and easy to build, they built the fuselage primarily out of plywood. And building it in that way meant that it was able to take a few hard knocks. And that particular design concept then found its way into the Moth. And so that was a successful pointer to the future.
On the port side, just below the engine, I've noticed it's got Miss Kenya on it. Is there any significance on that?
And this particular one was actually exported to East Africa, to what was then called Kenya at the time, Kenya nowadays. And it became the first ever aeroplane to be registered in the Kenyan registration. It was actually owned by a gentleman called Campbell Black. That's a name that we all know about.
Indeed, yeah,
because together with Scott, they flew the famous DH-88 Comet Racer, the Grosvenor House plane that's also here at Shuttleworth.
Yeah.
So there's a connection there as well. So the next thing they had to do, having tried out a lot of things with the DH.51, is to start with a clean sheet of paper, and that's what led to the original Moth. So hopefully we can go and see that now.
Well, perhaps we should do now. Okay, so here we are in front of a Moth. What can you tell me about this particular aircraft?
Well, this particular aircraft was only the 8th Moth that was ever built out of 1,500 of the aircraft. It was actually first flown in August 1925, the same year as the prototype. One of the very earliest Moths, probably the oldest Moth that is still flyable. You can tell a bit about its age, partly because of the undercarriage, which has got the original undercarriage design as opposed to the X undercarriage that the later models had. Yeah. So probably the oldest Moth in existence, certainly one of the oldest that's flying today.
So how did it differ from the DH.51?
So comparing this with the 51, we've now got an aeroplane that's much smaller, it's lighter. We've simplified the wing structure, so you've only got single bay wings as opposed to 2 bay wings, so that's easier to construct and maintain. It's only a 2-seater aeroplane, so the whole thing is that much smaller. But you can still tell the links to the 51 because of the fuel tank above it, because of the shape of the rudder and the ailerons. It's basically a classic de Havilland design that's derived from the 51.
One thing I've noticed is that lovely colour of blue. Any significance to that?
Yeah, so what de Havilland used to do is sell the aircraft with the wings always painted silver, but as a customer you could choose which colour you wanted for the fuselage and the main struts. This particular colour was typically applied by aircraft flying clubs in Lancashire.
Oh, great, excellent.
There you
yes,
go.
Well.
Yellow is very familiar to a lot of people. That's often indicating a flying club based around London. Red, often a flying club based around Newcastle. So the colour of the fuselage would tell you the flying club that you were part of.
That's good, that's
so
excellent.
That's the reason for that.
So on the 51 there was a problem with the engine. Did they solve the engine problem with the Moth?
So what they did with the Moth is they made use of work that was done by Frank Halford. And Frank Halford took the basic 8-cylinder Renault engine that originally had been used in the 51, and he built another engine of just 4 cylinders. That particular engine was known as the Cirrus. It could generate 50 horsepower, it was lightweight, it was powerful, and it was reliable. And in many respects, the success of the Moth was partly due to the fact that they'd now got an engine from Frank Halford that was usable.
I can see the word Moth on the front there. Is there any significance to that?
Well, there are 2 reasons for calling it a moth. First of all, Geoffrey de Havilland himself was very interested in insects. That was a hobby of his, and so he would be quite inclined to call it something like that. But the second thing is that these particular aircraft were designed for flying clubs. And one of the aspects of a flying club is you need to make sure you've got enough space. And so the Moth was actually designed with folding wings. The wings actually folded back alongside the fuselage towards the tail. Having something with folding wings is easier to store, and the wings folded back like a Moth.
But was it successful?
Absolutely. It very much established de Havilland in the 1920s as the premier provider of aircraft for flying clubs.
Right.
1,500 of the original Moth design were actually developed, but beyond that it led to a whole series of aircraft. Tiger Moth, Fox Moth, Hornet Moth, just to name 3.
Right.
So it was the ubiquitous aircraft. It led to the series of other aircraft like the Tiger Moth, which was the most produced aircraft that de Havilland even had.
Yes, it was.
And that in turn led to the success of de Havilland during the 20s and 30s and their future success going forward. So very much it was this plane that led to the future of de Havilland.
I see that we've got a tribute here with Amy Johnson.
Yeah.
I know she flew a Moth, and so did Francis' sister. But they flew Gypsy Moths. Can you tell me about them?
Yeah, so the Gypsy Moth illustrates some of the flexibility of the Moth design, because it was so popular that they weren't able to produce enough of the Cirrus engines, and therefore it was necessary to come up with a new engine. Frank Halford developed the famous Gypsy engine, which was then mated to the Moth, and that's what resulted in the Gypsy Moth. There are a number of different engine types tried in the Moth, which I think is a tribute to the flexibility and the long-lastingness of the design.
I can see that we're standing in front of another Moth. Can you tell me something about this aircraft?
So this is a DH.60X. One of the ways you can tell the X is the way the undercarriage is done. It was first built in 1929, and this particular aeroplane was actually flown by Richard Shuttleworth himself. And the reason for looking at this plane is just to illustrate the flexibility of the Moth design. This aircraft originally had the Cirrus 1 engine in. Subsequently, they re-engined it, and she's now flying with the Hermes engine in it, just like others were subsequently re-engined with the Gypsy engine.
Yeah.
So on Thursday, the 31st of July this year and the 1st of August, we're going to be back with our video team. The Moth Club will be flying in as many Moth and other de Havilland derivative aircraft as they possibly can, and they're hoping to get as many as 100 de Havilland types in order to celebrate the centenary of the DH.60. They're also hoping to put together, weather permitting, a Moth display of up to 16 aircraft. So we're really looking forward to coming back, having the opportunity to not only photograph some of the planes, but also to photograph and interview some of the enthusiasts who have restored some of these great aircraft. Do check out Shuttleworth's website for this particular event and make sure that you come along. It would be great to see you on the ground. We'd particularly like to thank the Shuttleworth Veteran Aeroplane Society for allowing us to video today, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video and seeing you in the Centenary of Moths in July.